The cold, hard truth about creating your most listened to podcast and how to attract new clients. I believe that treating your solo business is more and more about creating a media company. And if you see it that way, you will actually attract clients. Working from a demand and attracting people is really, I think, the way to go in 2022. My podcast, for instance, helps me share my stories, personal and business. I can help people for free who aren't ready to invest. And I'm having the undivided attention from people for about 10 till 45 minutes, depending on how long the episode takes. But the thing is, it is very difficult keeping it up. And I've created this idea for myself that I want to do this for a year and see what works and what doesn't, and then decide if I want to continue. And I'm helping you with my step-by-step plan to create your own podcast and how to make it successful. This is Big Business with Sarah, the podcast for entrepreneurs who want to continue building their business and understand you should never stop learning. On Reddit, I read the following numbers and the stats, and I was so surprised reading this actually because I was already really one of the top 1% of the podcasts, and I'm going to share them with you because I thought they were so insightful. So 90% of the podcasts in the world don't get past episode 3. So that is 1.8 million people or podcasts who quit. And of the 200,000 left, 90% will quit after 20 episodes. And that's another 180,000 podcasts gone. And to be in the top 1% of podcasts in the world, you only need to publish 21 episodes of your podcast. So you're almost there. Your competition is not the 2 million podcasts. It is the 20,000 podcasters who don't quit, right? So if you're thinking that the podcast market is saturated, if you're thinking that it's not for you, sorry. It might not be for you, but actually the thing is that if you're focusing on those 20,000 people in the world, it's not really that hard. And I'm saying this all in English, but I am Dutch, and especially if you're focused on the Dutch audience, I mean, I didn't find the Dutch numbers, but I mean, can you only imagine how much easier it's going to be to focus on that Dutch crowd and how small actually that niche is? So the first step I want you to take is to think about why start a podcast, right? And this is also one of the reasons why so many people quit before, even the 4th episode, but also the 20th, is that they don't understand why they're doing it. So a why could be you want to get more sales. A why could be you want to work on your personal branding because you want people to understand what you stand for so that you attract the perfect ideal client. The third reason is, and it's a little bit aligned with the other two, is lead generation. So imagine you're talking to a client, or imagine someone follows you on Instagram or LinkedIn, and they can actually learn more from you because they are listening to your podcast and you want them to hear what you're saying. Fourth reason could be finding your voice. And this is so interesting. Actually, I think, this is episode 37 for me, so I'm in the top 1%. But the thing that actually this podcast, of course, coaching has helped me finding my voice, but also the podcast has helped me finding my voice because I learned, if you're doing something, for instance, if you're working with someone privately, one-on-one, you're doing it a little bit different than if you would do it for a larger audience, right? You would be a little bit more, you would be talking more general, if you're talking in your podcast, and whilst you're talking with someone one-on-one, you're talking to them very privately and to their private challenges and everything, but actually it really stretches you to find your voice and actually really think about, okay, but how would this work best for you? So that's one of the hidden reasons. I didn't notice that why, but actually it has helped me a lot. The fifth reason could be sharing your expertise. So you have so much to offer, and there's people asking you questions all the time, and you're thinking, yeah, you know what? I can give actually free advice, but it's not going to help me because then they're not going to buy from me. You know what? I'm going to bundle all those questions and put them in the podcast. That's one of the things that I'm doing too. And maybe you just want to really interview interesting guests. Maybe you are the next Oprah. I mean, if you are, I would love to get in touch with you because I'm a great fan of Oprah, and everybody who wants to be her or, be on her fan club. But maybe you just want to interview interesting guests. Maybe you want to learn more. So there's so many podcasts I listen to that I think, those guests are very interesting. I want to learn more about them. And actually, you can also create that. So I've been interviewing 2 of my business coaches and 2 of my clients for my podcast. And I really enjoyed it. And I think I'm going to keep it a mix of practical advice and interviews. And it's also for me, to think, what would it help you most, my listener? So I'm always thinking from that perspective. So yeah, I'm a little bit playing around with that still. So now I'm going to actually what I wanted to say to you as my second tip is think about what your ideal client should listen to. So what is in their benefit? Be very clear about this. I mean, of course, you can just talk. For instance, I really enjoy listening to the Seth Godin podcast. It's called Akimbo. And he's just talking. Every week, he's just talking in his microphone and he's, talking his way. He's using a lot of analogies, which I really love, and I should do actually more. I think we can learn a lot from Seth Godin, but everyone listens to him because he's Seth Godin. By the way, if you don't know him, he is a marketing guru. He has written I can call it groundbreaking book. This is marketing, and he's talking very much about, starting a tribe, and it's a really very modern way of looking at marketing. So he's done a lot actually for the marketing world. By the way, I also introduced him once on stage in New York in 2019 when I was hosting a conference. So I'm always a little bit, Seth Godin. I was talking to him and he, I brought my Dutch translation of the book. I brought it to New York and asked him to sign it. And it was all very nice. And he's a very, very lovely person. And very down to earth. Anyway, Seth Godin, the Akimbo podcast. I was not prepared to share this with you, but now you know that I am also a little bit of a fan girl right there. But so Seth Godin can just talk into a microphone, right? So that's what many people think, that, I'm just starting a podcast, I'm just hitting records and that's it. Well, it's... I wish it was that easy, but it's not, because I really have to think about, what my ideal client, which could be you, wants to listen to. So for instance, right now I'm creating a podcast about podcasts. And because I know that there's many people who are thinking about creating a podcast, and this is, I hope, helping you to listen to my journey and also to pick up from what I've learned, and but also maybe what I've left, but I didn't do. So for instance, some podcasts are all about just giving interviews. Well, I'm not really all about that only. I also want to give advice. So be very clear about this. Dive into the pain of your ideal client. What do they want to learn? What do they want to read, listen to? And also add some personal stories, right? So for instance, my Seth Godin story, this is a story that not many people can tell. And right now, what? Sarah is also a conference host. So, try to, have those little hooks that people recognize you from, and, understand where you're coming from, and how you got your experience, and also why people should work with you and why they should care, actually. So how to start? So, and maybe up until now, you're thinking, oh, you know what? I really don't want to do those 20 episodes. I really don't care about what my ideal client wants. Well, I mean, you can still continue listening, of course, but maybe then a podcast is not for you. Or if you just want to talk, into the World Wide Web, you can always do it. It's really up to you, and it's actually also very cheap. So, how to start if you haven't lost all your interest yet? So start with your offer first. So you're a business owner, maybe you're an artist. Think about what you're selling, right? So what is your current offer? So maybe you have a book, a CD, maybe you have a course, maybe you have merchandise. And think about ways how to tell a story around that product. So for instance, my big business program. The launch is closed right now, but I can still talk about it because there is a new launch coming in the end of the year. And you know what? People still listen to my episodes also 1 week after I launched it. So think about your offer, what you have to, what you're selling, and how can you create content around this. So for instance, in my big business mastermind, I'm talking about sales, mindset, knowledge. So knowledge is really about your product tree, product suite, what are you offering, leadership, network, and productivity. So those are my 6 modules. So every podcast episode is a little bit about this. And if I would put this podcast in a category, it would probably be network, because network is all about lead generating, sales, and everything. So if you want, I think I would. I'm a little bit in doubt of this, so I would love to start a conversation in the DMs on Instagram or LinkedIn. But I want to ask you to create a free lead magnet for your visitors. So there's always something that you can look at, if you're listening to my podcast. So for instance, I always create a blog article with a summary of the podcast episode, because if you're walking or cooking or driving, you don't have to listen back to the entire episode, but I just wrote down all the pointers for you. Actually, while I'm saying this, I'm realizing I don't have lead magnets for this for this podcast episode, but I'm going to make one up because I have so many things. You know what? I'm going to link the sales plan workshop, which is a free workshop. It's a 20-minute workshop. And this is how you can make your sales plan so that you can also plan your podcast episodes. Here, there you go. And this is what a little bit of experience does with a person. Normally, I would really freak out. Normally, I mean, half a year ago when I started the podcast. But now I'm thinking, you know what? I'm going to add the sales plan workshop because I've had so many great responses, and so I think it's also going to help you. So currently I'm at a stage in my business and I'm not really sure. I have to be honest, I'm not really sure about if you should collect all the email addresses, to really get that lead generation, but I'm a little bit more for demand generation, So the thing is, with a lead magnet, people will need to put in their email address, and then you will have their email address, and then they will follow your training, or they will download your white paper or whatever you have prepared. And then you'll have the email address, and you can, send them emails, into a funnel, maybe into, all your product suite and everything. But there is also, so I'm also more active on LinkedIn. I'm following many people in sales and marketing. And there is a new movement going on, it's 2022 now. And it's really more about, collecting those emails is very old-fashioned. People really don't want to do that. You're losing a lot of opportunity right there. So yeah, I'm not really sure yet. So I think that my podcast in itself is already a demand generation. And then the lead magnet will actually collect the email addresses, which, can also actually help people, remind them that they could work with me. But I'm not really sure yet if I should do this. So yeah, bear with me here. The sales plan workshop actually does work with an email address. So I'm going to check if you've downloaded it. We'll see. Share your value. That's the third advice in the how part is, roughly think about sharing 80% of value and 20% of promo if your program. So I remember I once asked at the beginning of my podcast, this was really, I think it was episode 4, 5, 6 or something. I asked her what they thought of my podcast, and she was dead honest. And I really didn't like it. She was saying I was doing too much promo. And honestly, I did at the beginning. You can listen back to, I don't know, episode 6 or 7. And actually, I learned so much from that comment, and I was not happy to hear it, obviously, but she was right. You can still listen to it and cringe, obviously. I'm not really too ashamed. But yeah, so just to show that you can really learn a lot from your feedback. So also think about your format, right? So my first format was I would have, for instance, so I think that the topic would be, so if I was saying something like, you think the problem is this, but actually the problem is this, and here are 3 ways to avoid that. That was the format actually that I chose, and then at the end of each episode, I would have a quote of a famous person that would kind of talk about the episode. And I don't use that format anymore because it was too narrowing for me, but actually it really helped me in the beginning to really focus and to really find my voice and my style. And try to have a goal each episode. So what do you want others to learn? So I want you to really start creating your podcast, you having all the tools in hands so that you can actually start and really be successful, more successful, for instance, than I was at the beginning. So you always have other options. You can always change or pivot your format of your podcast. So don't be too much focused on this, but I think it's good to start with it at the beginning of your podcast. And if I'm thinking about all the podcasts that I'm listening to, so many that are changing over the months, and that's totally fine. Also my podcast, but there are so many more. So yeah. Also decide, if you're not, only US English or English speaking. I don't know why I said US English, but so decide which language you want to talk into. Sorry. So the language, for me, of course, I'm talking in English, but I am Dutch, as you can probably hear. And I really made a very conscious decision about this. So of course, if someone is a private client in Dutch, I'm not going to speak English to them. I'm just going to speak Dutch, right? And also in my mastermind currently, there are only people speaking Dutch. It would have been open for English speaking people, and then everybody would switch to English. But the thing that I've learned so much, so the people in my mastermind currently are, one person is coming from Ecuador. But the reason why I like so much talking in English, or communicating in English or attracting clients in English, is because I have so much great experience from working in a different country. So I was interning in New York when I think I was 22 or 23. And I remember my world just opened up 100-fold. And because I thought it was so great that there was such an international exchange, and I learned so much from that. And actually, I'm taking that experience with me right now here in my current business, the Big Business course, and all my offerings, and also my podcast, because I want to have that international exchange. I've seen what it can do to people, and especially New York. It's a very international city, obviously many nationalities, and I do like, of course, working with Dutch people, obviously, because Dutch people most of them are my friends, and I love that. But sometimes, if you're just communicating in Dutch, it can be also very, you can be also very culturally comfortable. I don't know if this is a word, but here we are. I'm going to introduce it. So, if you're working with more international people, you are actually challenging yourself more. So I really believe I think it's a great addition. So that's why I wanted to do my podcast in English. Whole story. Also, my course is in English. My video course and all my trainings and courses and lead magnets and emails. So because I really intentionally chose that, because I want to work with people in English. But once again, if they're Dutch, it's fine. I can talk in Dutch. Geen probleem. So how do you, another question on the how is, in your format is if you want to share mostly practical advice. So maybe 10 tips on how to, create your first podcast, or 5 tips to grow your email list. Could be like that. That's a little bit my podcast. Or maybe you want to be more philosophical. So if you want to be a captain of your industry, maybe you can talk about news. For instance, if you're working in the finance business, you can talk about crypto, and if it's environmentally friendly, you can talk about it, maybe invite some guests about it. So I've had a feminism podcast and a radical responsibility podcast. Those were a little bit more philosophical, sorry. And on the feminist podcast, I also invited a guest to talk about this. And it could be anything, really. You don't have to really choose, but it's going to help you right at the beginning. So I first started with the practical part, and then, it was episode 24 where I wanted to write something about radical responsibility, because I was so annoyed by people not taking responsibility of their lives and blaming others for their situation. You have to listen to the podcast episode to get the nuance there, because there is, of course, nuance. There are many people in the world that are really fighting for their lives currently. And I know if you're very sick, or, if you have really big troubles, yes, of course, it's not completely your fault and not your responsibility entirely. But I'm talking about the group of people, the majority of the people that I'm talking to, that are not taking their responsibility. Because it's, I don't know actually why, but that's what the episode is about. So listen to it if you want to. Another question in the how is think about how often do you want to launch an episode. So for instance, I'm launching an episode every week. I was thinking, that's a great way. It's a little bit, what is it like? So, something that you're going to in your bath, maybe once a week. It's a little bit of a habit or a ritual that you're creating for your listeners. So I know that also most of my clients are listening to my podcast, so they know, okay, I get some extra tips and advice and coaching from Sarah. But you can do it, maybe 1 week every day, and maybe you want to do it one week once a month, 1 week, and then every day, or maybe you want to do it every 2 months. I don't know, but try to get some consistency there. You can, of course, work with seasons. So, for instance, right now, the White Lotus, my favorite television series of last year, is going to have a season 2 in October, end of October. So, it could also work like that. But you can also just do, weekly or daily episodes, like, for instance, As the World Turns did for a very long time. So what do you need to make this work? And what I mean by that is, it's a little bit, thinking about, what is going to be, what is something that you need to really leverage on that. So I want you to discover how many hours a week or a month you want to work on this free content. And it will get easier, I promise. So I'm currently creating and recording this podcast episode in about 1 hour, which is really fast. But before it was, I think, 2 hours per episode. I don't really remember. I should have logged it actually, but I thought in the beginning it was much, much harder. So there's a method that you can use to actually see how you can make this work for yourself. So it's called the Whoop model, to apply to actually all your goals. So it's wish. So the wish is, which goal do you want to achieve with your podcast? How many listeners do you want? How often do you want to air? That's the outcome. How will you feel when you actually achieve that accomplishment? So if you have maybe 3 new clients because of your podcast, the other O is an obstacle. So, what are things that are stopping you right now? So maybe you're afraid to go on camera. I'm talking about that later. Maybe you're afraid to talk. That's going to be a little bit more difficult. And the plan is, the P of the Whoop is, how are you going to stop those obstacles, or are you going to jump over those obstacles? So actually having that plan and, kind of reverse engineering, kind of thinking, how can I make this work for me? Because sometimes things can look hard, can seem hard, but they actually aren't. You just have to put in a little bit of work. And so, this is very important to reach your goals and get those obstacles out of the way, because they're not helping you. So now, very practical, the materials. You need a microphone. So check if you're buying this. I mean, you can find, if you Google podcast microphone, you can find it. Yes, well, I'm having a Rode microphone. Sorry, I'm not even sure if I say Rode or Rode, because it has that little it has a strange O. And check if it's USB, or that if you need new cables or other equipment like a mixer to make it work. I'm using a mixer here, but you don't really have to at the beginning. There's so many great microphones out there. What else you need? A laptop with software to record. I'm using GarageBand right now, or you can use Logic. Headphones can also really work. I should use them, actually. I always forget. But that way you can hear how it's how others will listen to it. And if you want to record a video too, so for instance, I'm also on YouTube, and I actually have a lot of listens on YouTube. You can use, not a lot of listens, right? I mean, but also, it is a compound effect. So I'm having my listens on Spotify and on YouTube, and together it's, adding up quite nicely. So I use a camera, and I'm recording my podcast on Zoom too. So I'm recording on GarageBand and on Zoom to have a backup, and my microphone can be, on both software programs. And I'm also having a ring light right here. And if you want, you can have some extra studio lights. So currently I'm recording this in my office, but I was also recording some previous episodes in my living room. And that's where I used some extra lights because of the windows, and the light was just not really, really pretty. And I think that ring light was quite expensive. I think it was 200 euros. And those other lights, the studio lights, I don't remember, it's 50 or 75 euros. It's not too much. And also a microphone doesn't have to be too expensive. And, the software to record, GarageBand, is free if you're using an Apple computer. Logic, I think you have to pay for that. I'm not really sure. And Zoom is also practically free. So you don't have to use a camera, but it might help you, promote your podcast. So I also want to share something about that I really know myself. So I am terrible at executing blue tasks. So those are tasks that are very, very clear. You have to edit and record. And I just really, really don't like to do that. I get bored and I don't do it. So my husband helped me with producing my first 30 episodes. So he was sitting right next to me. And now actually I'm recording them by myself after 30 episodes. And he edits my podcasts with Logic. He adds the the opening tune and the end tune, and my video editor edits and uploads my video, and they're both working on this for about 10 minutes per episode, I guess, because it's, I don't ask them to cut anything. I think I'm going to leave the cough in, just to show that I'm also a human being. So for software, I'm using Buzzsprout to distribute my podcast. Because of this, you can listen to me on various platforms. And you also might need a jingle. I mean, you don't really have to. You can do it, at the beginning of the podcast. You can find so many podcast jingles if you Google it. I asked my husband to make one for me, and then we actually realized that one of the songs that I once created, which is called Bamboo, that could probably really serve very well as an intro song. So that's how we did it. So maybe you know someone who makes who is able to make little jingles, and it's actually very easy to find one online. And also make sure that the profile pic of your podcast really pops out, and try to use big colors there. So I'm seeing many beige podcasts, and if that's all your style, fine. But you're not popping out very much. So it's really it's really about what you want. Obviously, I like big colors because, I'm all about pink. And also, if you're having a YouTube video, try to work on your thumbnail, make it very attractive, because that's the reason why people are clicking on that. And then lastly, I want to share with you how you can promote your podcasts. There are so many ways. Actually, you can write out a press release. I didn't do that. I think I will do it very, very soon. But I just really wanted to feel first and then press release second. Write interesting copy on your social media. So don't say, hey, hello, my latest podcast episode is about how to create a podcast. No, actually it should be very, very interesting how to attract new clients by having a podcast. It should, then we go back to the ideal client, what they want, and try to think, why they find it interesting. Why would they listen to your podcast? And also, if you have video or if you have audio, by the way, you can share. Of course, you have audio. You can share snippets of your content. So it's very easy, for instance, for Buzzsprout to download an audio snippet. But I'm using video snippets, and I should do it much more. I just spoke to my video editor about this. If he could also create, little Instagram videos for me, because once again, it's a blue task, and this is just something that I cannot do, and I'm forcing myself, but I just don't. So, I'm asking other people to help me and pay them for it, of course. All right. So this is everything that I wanted to share with you. So I promised myself to do this weekly every, 52 weeks, actually. No, it's a little bit shorter because I started end of February. So, and I think I'm going to continue. I guess I already know for sure, but that's the initial goal that I set for myself, to create 52 podcast episodes. And really the key is to outwork your competition, to beat the competition and to become that top 1%. And again, and you hear so many people say this, and I'm going to say it too, consistency is key. Keep on making those episodes. Even if they're terrible. If I listen to my first episodes, I'm like, cringe, hide, I don't want to see it. Ugh, where can I sign off? I don't want this anymore. Delete. But I'm not doing it. Because the reason why I'm not doing it, maybe I should tell you, is because I want you to see how I am growing in this too. And if you just want to have some fun, listen to it. I don't really care. But, I want to show you that this could work for you too. If you're thinking, what, I have no idea. Don't worry, you can actually make this work for yourself. So thinking of yourself as a media company, as a solopreneur, I guess it's a great way to to develop yourself. So currently I am, and your business. So currently I am actually reframing my product tree. So my product tree is my product suite. Most people call it product suite. I call it product tree. I've created a whole philosophy and a whole theory about this, and this is all in my big business framework. And so I'm currently creating new products. So there might be some tests coming your way, and if you want to be one of the first to be part of the test group, because I believe that you should always validate your products before you're going to sell them or services. If you want to be part of the test group, you can join my mailing list, and I will link it in the description where you can subscribe, so it can send you a couple of updates your way. And you can follow the sales plan workshop that will help you to understand what kind of offer you're having, of course. So I'm also helping in the sales plan workshop. I'm helping you create a little bit of your offer and how to sell it. And then you can make your planning for the podcast. The first 21 podcast episodes that you're going to create. Don't worry, I think I started with the first 6 episodes. I released 5, and then I created 6, and then I moved from there. Thank you so much for listening. So I said it all, the launch for the big business is closed. And you can subscribe to test some new products and services from me, and you can follow my free sales plan workshop. Thank you so much for listening, and catch you next week.